violence occur in your workplace? So let's just go from there.
Shooting incidents are often the first things that come to mind when people think of workplace violence. In fact, other types of workplace violence are actually much more common than shooting sprees. These, unfortunately, often common acts of workplace violence include rape, assaults, bullying, threats, and intimidation, and harassment. Specialists in the field of workplace security separate violence into 5 main categories. Violence by strangers. A stranger is anyone with no direct personal or business relationship with a particular workplace. The individual is there in most cases to commit a robbery or some other criminal act. Strangers cause the majority of fatal injuries in workplaces. Putting this category in perspective, the workplace is considered high risk would include retail establishments open late at night, and a group of workers considered at high risk would be cab drivers. Violence by customers or clients. Customers or clients often make verbal threats or engage in threatening behavior, throwing objects, slamming a fist on a desk, etc. But physical assaults are also common. Professions that involve high volumes of customer contact are at greatest risk. For example, customer service representatives, bus drivers, healthcare providers, and social service representatives. Of course, law enforcement officers and corrections personnel often encounter violent individuals. Violence by coworkers. Recently terminated former employees who have returned to harass current employees or managers would fall into this category, but so would a manager or supervisor who bullies his or her employees. Violence by personal relations. This category includes current or former spouses, lovers, friends, or even acquaintances. While men are just as likely to be the victims of violence by strangers, women are more likely to be the victim of violence perpetrated by a personal relation. Violence by terrorism. Violence by strangers usually targets an individual. Violence by terrorism usually targets the building or the business itself. This does not mean that individuals are not at risk. Bombings like the one that took place at the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City targeted the federal government. Nevertheless, 168 people died and almost 700 more were injured. Although men are twice as likely to die as a result of workplace violence, murder is also the #1 cause of workplace death for women. Men, however, are most often harmed by strangers, while women are more likely to suffer at the hands of someone they know. For some victims, however, their vulnerability stems from their line of work. Security staff, human resources employees, healthcare and retail employees, law enforcement professionals, and cab drivers, regardless of gender, are all at risk because of the fields of work they're in. Moreover, in the last 10 years, the number of supervisors murdered by their subordinates have doubled.
True or false?
What does it say?
Women are more likely than men to be victims of fatal violence by strangers.
A recent international survey determined that as many as 37% of American workers, approximately 54 million people, have been bullied at work. When you consider the number of people affected by bullying also includes coworkers who have had to witness the activity, over 49% of American workers are impacted. Additionally, the same survey determined that workplace bullying is 4 times more prevalent than any other illegal form of harassment. Perhaps the most disturbing finding, however, is the fact that in 62% of cases of workplace bullying reported to employers, the actions of the employers either worsened the problem or did nothing, resulting in a loss of somewhere between 21 to 28 million workers. Finally, the survey determined that most bullies were bosses, and their targets were usually female employees. Systematic long-term bullying of employees by either coworkers and/or supervisors can create an abusive environment where victims may respond violently. When a workplace contains bullies and the organization does nothing to prevent it or respond to it, a dangerous environment exists and violence is likely to escalate. Additionally, Bullying affects employees who are not directly involved, and the quality of the work environment suffers. Consequently, productivity usually declines when bullying goes on unchecked in the workplace. Economists suggest that the effects of workplace violence cost American employers as much as $300 billion per year due to reduced productivity, absenteeism, and employee turnover. Employers also pay hard costs in the form of workers' compensation claims, health insurance costs, and direct medical expenses due to injury and stress. Employers, employees, family members all feel the effects of violence in the workplace. To reduce the risks of workplace violence, familiarize yourself with its warning signs and learn about the ways that you can address violence before it occurs. Although violence perpetrated by strangers is often hard to predict, other types of violence have observable warning signs that can provide an opportunity for preemptive action.
Okay, most workplace bullies are bosses. True or false?
A person with a potential for committing violent acts may exhibit the following characteristics: history of violence, social isolation, emotional problems, substance abuse issues, obsessions, stalking behaviors, and career frustration. These characteristics do not mean that a person will commit violence in the workplace, though a history of violence strongly suggests that an individual is capable of additional acts of violence. Nevertheless, the more of these characteristics a person exhibits, the greater the risks that he or she will be involved in an episode of workplace violence. Supervisors and coworkers should pay attention to the following: violent or threatening behavior towards coworkers, not limited to physical altercations. Threats, destruction of property, bullying, stalking, and harassing all fall under the category of violent behavior. Bizarre, paranoid activity, erratic or extreme changes in behavior, or poor personal hygiene. In other words, deteriorating or unkempt appearance. Emotional problems, including signs of depression, inappropriate emotional displays. In other words, crying, explosive outbursts of rage, screaming, etc. Drug and alcohol abuse. Deteriorating job performance, extreme tardiness in absences, lack of concentration or focus, and constant need of attention from supervisors, or constant conflicts with coworkers and supervisors. Understand that there are sportsmen and women who own multiple weapons who present no risk to the workplace. However, if an employee is acting strangely, not getting along with supervisors or coworkers, or has job performance problems and begins talking about his or her weapons collection, it would be unwise and potentially dangerous to ignore that behavior. Workplace violence is usually set off by a trigger event, such as job-related issues, such as a poor review or a termination of employment. Legal crises, such as a bankruptcy, foreclosure, custody hearing, or restraining order. Divorce, death in the family, or a spurned romance. Or significant dates like anniversaries, birthdays, or dates of historic significance. Although domestic violence, by definition, usually occurs at home, it can spill into the workplace. Signs that may point to domestic violence include tardiness or unexplained absences, poor job performance, anxiety, poor concentration, unexplained bruises or other injuries, moodiness or depression, inappropriate clothing, in other words, turtlenecks in the summer, etc., to hide bruises or injuries, disruptive phone calls and or emails, or disruptive visits from the perpetrator. In the aftermath of a partner leaving their abuser, the abusive partner may stalk or threaten their victim. They may vandalize property or